Assalamu alaikum. A very warm welcome to you. This is Neaz Ahmad from NTV weekly chat show Talking Point. In our studios today, we have, as usual, a very distinguished guest, Mr. Khan. But he is not Mr. Khan that most of you know as Mr. Sadiq Khan. He is Mr. Harun Khan, Secretary General of Muslim Council of Britain. He has some connection with the London Transport, but he works for London Transport and he is an engineer. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Harun, you have been in this capacity for last 2 years, is it?
Just coming up to 2 years.
Coming up to 2 years. And Muslim Council of Britain is an organization, an umbrella organization for about 500 Muslim organizations like mosques, schools and charities and all that. What is the purpose, what is the objective of Muslim Council of Britain? I know it was established some 10 years ago, 12 years
20
ago.
years now.
20 years ago, how time flies. And apart from what you have achieved, I mean, what is the purpose?
The main purpose is to really provide a voice for Muslims, work in cooperation, bring consensus, and bring our communities together, but also to improve our lives for the Muslim communities within Britain.
Right. So it is an organization that can speak on behalf of the other organizations that you represent.
That's correct.
Right. And who do you speak to?
So we get approached by the media quite a lot on a number of range of issues to do with Muslims. Muslims are, as we see nowadays, very much covered in the media. And a lot of the time that the stories that are told or some of the questions that are raised are not necessarily always correct. So we present as much as we can the factual information, the truth about Muslims, and also we challenge some of the myths and misconceptions and some of the stories, the negative stories that are told about Muslims.
Right. Well, so what were the circumstances that led to the creation of this colossal, huge organization called MCB?
MCB has a very long history, and at the time, 20 years ago, the people who were running MCB at the time realized that there was a need for a collective voice. Muslim organizations were only just growing, purpose-built mosques were coming onto the scene, and it was very apparent that there was a need for addressing some of the concerns that Muslims had, especially in terms of their sort of societal needs, in terms of education, housing, and so housing policy and so on. Because I know one particular instance, for example, is around education, particularly around faith schools, and trying to get the government to support more faith schools was one of the initiatives. So bringing organizations together, naturally, coming together as a collective voice gives you more strength. And I think that's one of the main sort of thinking behind bringing organizations together was there.
So you're talking to the media and talking to different organizations like that of government?
Yes, so for a number of years we speak to government departments, we make written submissions on government consultations, on areas where we feel that any government policy can have an impact on our communities. More recently, obviously, particularly around counter-terror legislation.
Right.
Sometimes on education policy, which can have an impact on Muslims. So different ranges, different departments, we'll write to them, we'll write our representative view from Muslims on hate crime. So there's a huge increase in hate crime against Muslims. I attended with two of my colleagues the Home Affairs Select Committee, and we presented oral evidence on when they were talking about counter-extremism. So we give a community view, a collective view.
You represent the 500 organizations that you say, MCB, but does the British government recognize you as the representative organization?
I think everybody recognises MCB as it is, because we're not looking for that kind of recognition. I think what we're trying to present is...
I mean, when they have to talk to the Muslim community, do they come to you?
Not exclusively to us.
No.
The current government isn't, not in such a direct manner.
There was a time when it did.
It did in the past. And what we say is that we want to have that engagement, but they should talk to all communities. So that's always been our line. We're not the only organisation, rightly so. We are the largest body of Muslim organisations in the UK, non-sectarian, and very diverse ethnically as well, representing our various mosques and institutions and charities. So we represent a very large voice, and even statistically in surveys that were conducted by an organisation called Comres in 2015, they did a national survey of Muslims. They did a survey on a range of questions, one of which they put in saying, do you feel that MCB represents your views? 55% of Muslims who responded said the MCB represented their views.
Great. Do we know the real population of Muslims in this country?
We do. So from the last census in 2011, it's just under 3 million. And MCB played a very significant role in actually
persuading the government to
include the question from 2001. So that was another piece, a strong piece of work done by the people who were involved at that time. They included in 2001, they included the question in the census, which was a voluntary question around your religious affiliation. And then in 2011, the question was there again, which then actually helped us to carry out a deeper study on the census data to do the comparisons in the data itself. How much change there had been from 2001 to 2011, but also how we compared to the national picture as a population.
Right. And would it also help the Muslim community in making further demands like that in the education sector and all that?
Definitely. I mean, that's one of the main purposes of being included within the census. So Muslims are within the black and minority ethnic community. If you look at the study, there's 1 in 3 of the BME community is Muslim. So what we say is what's good for the BME community is good for Muslims.
Great. Have you done any MCB? Have you MCB done any work on the history of Muslims in the UK? I mean, how old is the history? I mean, when did they appear first on the scene? I mean,
so there's been various pieces of work, I think, done by academics and historians. The one that most recently comes to mind is the archive project at the East London Mosque, which was launched only a few months ago. This is really preserving the historical picture of not just the mosque but the community around it as well. There's 100 years of history there. And I think that project, supported by English Heritage, I'm trying to remember the name of the body that backed it. Something like that, I think, is fantastic, really, for helping our community, for those of us who have been here for quite some time, to preserve our history for our future, leave a legacy. So there's a stronger picture of our connection to this country.
So does it go back to 100 years or 200 years?
It's 100 years for East London Mosque. I think you probably know the answer than I do with your background. Probably goes further back. So we know in the early 1900s was Abdullah Quilliam in Liverpool who set up the first mosque, and the Quilliam Society, quite well established. And I think it goes even further back than that as communities came and went through the UK.
Well, once we were researching about the first Indian restaurant, so-called Indian restaurant, they said that it was somewhere in that area, Liverpool or Manchester or somewhere. Liverpool perhaps because people would jump off the docks.
Yeah.
It was an Indian some dean who had established or set up what was the first Indian restaurant, you see. and probably going by the name that was, Deen was a Muslim name.
Yeah.
Could have been Gangadeen,
Could
but could be Shamsuddin.
it could be.
So it's pretty interesting to know that Muslims have been here for a long time, and they have been contributing to the economy, they have been contributing to the society, and we are here today. So would you consider that Muslims are, I mean, I know you were in the Houses of Parliament recently,
Yeah.
talking about integration. See, let's change the topic. Yeah, talk about integration. Yeah, integration. How best to integrate? I mean, what is integration? Is it getting the right education, or speaking English in the proper manner, or with a stiff upper lip, or dressing like an Englishman, or just going to the pubs and coming out singing an old song? What is integration really?
So yes, we launched, the government actually launched a green paper for consultation on their strategy for integration.
Right.
On the same day, the MCB launched their view on integration in the form of a publication with a range of voices, contributors to the report, over 30 people from across society. So
Right.
a mixture of Muslims, non-Muslims, from different backgrounds from across the country, gave their perspective on how they saw what was known to be as integration. And I think this was just last Wednesday in Parliament, we launched the report. I think what's clear is from the messages that are coming out, that the government's view on integration and the way they've been advised in the past from the work that they've done is a very narrow perspective. It seems the guidance and the advice they were given by the former advisor they had, Dame Louise Casey, predominantly focused on Muslim communities and why Muslim communities need to integrate, rather than the view that we've given,
Yeah.
is that it's a two-way street.
True.
That we know, and it's factually known, that when Muslims move to certain areas and they grow as a community, then the local people start moving out, or the
Yeah.
terminology that's used is white flight.
Yeah.
So that's not really the Muslims' fault, or Muslim communities, or Asian communities within that as well. Education and other areas. You're right, I think in the discussion on Wednesday, one of the points that came out from one of our members speaking, and who's also written, is Sheikh Ibrahim Mogra, and he was speaking. He's a imam from Leicester, and he spoke quite strongly about the culture as well, that I can meet people, greet people, have friendships, but there are certain things that I can't do,
True.
which is go to the pub and take part in those activities. But it doesn't stop me having a relationship with people, and it's really about people coming together, sharing experiences.
Mm-hmm.
That's, in my view, if you want to call it integration or whatever you want to call it, there's obviously a terminology about what they view as integration, but it's really about people coming together and respecting and understanding and sharing experiences.
Right, on this very interesting point, we need to take a integration. Where do we stop? Does it mean assimilation? No.
Absolutely not. I think, there's a famous verse in the Quran where Allah says, "We have created you into nations and tribes so that you may come to know one another."
Mm-hmm. You speak different languages.
Exactly. So languages,
He made us different. isn't
cultures are different, food is different. How boring we would be as a society and a
it?
nation
We were cloned.
if we just had fish and chips every day. But curry, we know how famous curry is in the UK, and not just curry. The cultures and that people bring, the colourful life that people bring together, coming together, and people travel to different countries to get that enjoyment. So I think, on the whole, people generally enjoy mixing together, whether you call it multiculturalism, multi-religious, multi-ethnic. People enjoy that. I think unfortunately, the situation we're in now, it's a lot to do with what's happening around the way stories are told in the media, and the growth of the far right, the narrative of the far right, and some of the sort of populism that we're seeing in American politics and across the rest of Europe?
Is it because the Muslims are concentrated in one particular area, and then, as you said before, that the whites or the locals would leave the area? But then we will come back to this question after the break, okay? Thank you for being with us. Don't go away. We'll be back soon after this short break.